A millionaire invites a street boy to a fancy party to mock him, but the night takes an unexpected turn. They say every glittering party has its shadows, every polished floor a crack. Tonight's story takes us into the world of Andrew Blackwood, a millionaire with a reputation for wealth and indulgence. When he extends a surprise invitation to Carlos, a street boy living hand to mouth, everyone assumes it's a cruel stunt meant for a quick laugh. Yet what happens beneath the dazzling chandeliers and violin harmonies will change their fates forever. In a single night, the balance of power shifts. Loyalties form, betrayals crack open, and destinies collide. Stay with us to discover how one simple act can ignite a whirlwind of unforeseen events. Andrew Blackwood was the type of man one saw smiling in the pages of business magazines, resting his sculpted chin on a diamond-encrusted cane, or swirling cognac while perched in the corner of a high-end lounge. His wealth was the stuff of legend. Rumor had it that Andrew could buy a small country if he so wished. He traveled in private jets, hosted galas that drew in global icons, and flaunted an inflated sense of generosity, though in reality, he rarely extended a helping hand unless there was something in it for him. His reputation in the financial circles of Los Angeles was a curious paradox, revered for his success, despised for his vanity. Yet for all his financial conquests, Andrew had grown tired of the usual amusements. The nightclub openings, the Michelin star dinners, the black tie charity events, these had become predictable and monotonous. A restlessness gnawed at him. He craved something new, something that would prove he still held power over life's unpredictable outcomes. Like a cat playing with its food, he sought a new twist in the daily routine of his luxurious existence. That morning, Andrew sat in his lavish penthouse office on the top floor of the Blackwood Tower. The building soared in the middle of Beverly Hills, and from the tinted glass windows, one could see the entire city spread out like a shimmering tapestry. Andrew leaned back in his leather chair, gazing at a cluster of pedestrians below. From his perspective, they seemed no bigger than ants, a city full of tiny, insignificant lives scurrying to survive. His longtime personal assistant, Samantha White, stood by a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, meticulously taking notes about an upcoming gala that Andrew planned to host. Samantha was a diligent woman in her mid-30s, fiercely loyal but not entirely comfortable with Andrew's unscrupulous methods. She was known for her impeccable sense of organization, though her closest friends understood she grappled with a moral conflict working for someone as manipulative as Andrew. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, looking up from her tablet. "The event is scheduled for next Friday. I've confirmed the guest list, the catering, the entertainment." "Hold on, Samantha," Andrew interjected, pressing his manicured nails against the polished surface of his desk. "Is there something missing?" Samantha eyed him warily. "Everything is in order, sir. We have the top socialites in LA, a few from New York, even a handful of foreign dignitaries. It's going to be the event of the season." Andrew's smile was crooked. "Let's make it more interesting." "Meaning?" He stood and walked toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I want a twist, a spectacle. Something that will have these snobbish elites talking for months." Samantha's eyebrows lifted. "Like a performance? We could hire Cirque du Soleil or—" Andrew cut her off with a slow shake of his head. "No, too predictable. That's just money. I want something shocking, scandalous even, but not in an obvious way." He turned, the sunlight casting a harsh glow across his angular face. "A demonstration of class differences, a spectacle that highlights my benevolence while quietly humiliating someone else. Something that sends the rumor mill into a frenzy." At those words, Samantha felt a chill. She recalled the last time Andrew had indulged in such entertainment. A struggling artist was invited to paint Liv at one of his parties, only for Andrew to ridicule the artwork in front of the guests. The incident made the tabloids, but it also left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. "Who did you have in mind?" Samantha asked, hoping she might dissuade him if he chose a vulnerable target. Andrew's eyes traced the streets below. "See that boy down there?" He pointed to a corner outside a cafe where a slender figure in a tattered hoodie was trying to sell small trinkets to passers-by. Samantha peered down. The figure was indeed a boy, perhaps 16 or 17. He looked weary and hungry. "Ah, you talking about him?" "Yes. I've noticed him a few times this week. He's always in the same spot," Andrew said. His voice dropped to a near whisper, a sign that his mind was hatching a plan. "That's our guest of honor." A sickening wave of disapproval rolled through Samantha's chest, but she knew better than to protest outright. "You want to invite him to the party?" Andrew smirked. "I want to invite him, pay for his wardrobe, dress him up to mingle with the city's richest socialites, and watch as the night unfolds. I want to see how he reacts to the glitz and glamour he's never known. Let's see how he responds when the wolves circle around him." A flicker of sympathy crossed Samantha's eyes. If he can't navigate that world, he might be humiliated. "That's the idea," Andrew replied casually, his face reflecting a twisted delight. This party needed a star. He'll provide it. Samantha felt the moral quandary intensify, yet she dutifully wrote down the instruction: "Invite street boy from corner near cafe, P guest." And so began a plan that would alter lives in ways Andrew could never foresee. Carlos Ramirez had come to Los Angeles when he was 12, stowed away in the back of an old truck traveling from Arizona. He possessed few memories of his birthplace, only whispers of a dusty landscape and a mother whose face he could no longer clearly recall. At some point, he had been separated from any semblance of family. Now, at 17, life had narrowed down to survival on the city's streets. His spot outside the cafe was well chosen. The affluent occasionally dropped spare change in his hat. Sometimes tourists felt a pang of guilt and handed him a $5 bill. On rare days, a good Samaritan might buy him a hot meal. As the weeks and months wore on, he found a dull routine in the unpredictability. One day he could make nearly $50. The next, he might barely gather enough for half a sandwich. One afternoon, as Carlos offered his small handicrafts, woven bracelets he learned to make from another homeless artisan, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of him. The tinted window rolled down to reveal Samantha White. She wore a crisp blouse and an expression both firm and empathetic. "Are you Carlos?" she asked. He hesitated, instantly wary. "Who's asking?" "My name is Samantha White," she said, carefully extending a business card with her contact details. The elegant script and thick cardstock felt alien in Carlos's grimy hands. "I work for Mr. Andrew Blackwood. He'd like to invite you to an event." "Me?" Carlos echoed, glancing around. He half expected this to be a prank. He had been teased many times. "What kind of event?" "A black tie gala," Samantha explained, forcing a polite smile. "You'll be given a suit, transportation, whatever you need," Mr. Blackwood insists. Confusion, suspicion, and a faint glimmer of hope flickered in Carlos's dark eyes. "Why would a rich guy want me at his fancy party?" Samantha hesitated. She chose her words carefully. "He admires your resilience. You'll be treated well. It's a formal invitation." Carlos was no fool. He sensed there was something more to it. But the promise of a meal, a roof for the evening, and the possibility that this could be the break he'd been praying for, proved irresistible. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "All right, I'll go." Samantha handed him a sealed invitation embossed with gold leaf. "Next Friday, I'll pick you up from here at 6 in the evening. Don't be late." Then she left as abruptly as she arrived, leaving Carlos to stare at the card that felt ridiculously out of place in his calloused hands. A swirl of anxiety and excitement lodged in his chest. Could this be his chance to leave the streets for good, or was it just a cruel joke? The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind for Carlos. He had never owned a suit before, let alone one tailored to fit. Samantha had arranged for him to visit an upscale tailor shop nestled in a hidden alley off Rodeo Drive. As he stepped through the ornate wooden doors, he felt the stares of the staff. They clearly doubted a boy in frayed jeans could ever afford their services. But the moment Samantha's note of credit was presented, their attitudes switched to fawning politeness. Tailors measured him from shoulder to ankle, fussing over fabric swatches and comparing different shades of midnight blue cloth. Carlos stood awkwardly, arms outstretched, as if any movement might break something. At first, the pampering felt intoxicating, like stepping into a Hollywood movie set. Soon, though, the attention felt stifling, as if he were being scrutinized under a microscope. The staff bantered among themselves, sometimes forgetting he was there. He caught glimpses of their whispered remarks. "Isn't he a bit young? Do you think he's some kind of charity case?" Mr. Blackwood must be in one of his moods again. Later, Samantha quietly slipped Carlos a small stipend to buy shoes. "Go to Ferragamo," she said, scribbling the address. "They have your size on hold." Carlos swallowed. The magnitude of what was happening struck him again. He was about to rub shoulders with millionaires, maybe even celebrities. His instincts told him something was off. Why would a billionaire single him out like this? But he also recognized the chance to see a world he had only observed from behind glass or from a worn-out sidewalk. That night, he took refuge in a homeless shelter, cradling the garment bag that contained his newly tailored suit. He brushed off questions from others, choosing to keep his plans a secret, telling them that a wealthy man had offered him a golden ticket to a life of glitz might incite envy or disbelief. Or worse, someone might try to steal his prized outfit. The morning of the gala arrived, and with it came a new wave of anxiety. Carlos spent his day near a public restroom, trying to tidy himself. He washed his face, did his best to style his unkempt hair, and practiced tying the Windsor knot on the tie that accompanied his suit. He failed more times than he succeeded. By the time evening rolled around, his heart pounded with nerves. Samantha picked him up at 6 sharp, just as promised. The sedan whisked him through the city, weaving past rush-hour traffic. Carlos gazed out the window at the neon-lit streets, thinking of the many nights he had wandered these same blocks on foot. Upon arriving at the Blackwood Mansion, a palatial estate in the heart of Beverly Hills, he stared in awe at the towering columns, manicured gardens, and an ornate fountain that sparkled with colored lights. It felt like stepping into a fairy tale castle, only with the distinct hum of sports cars and cameras flashing. A team of valets in crisp uniforms opened the car door for him. As he stepped out, the first wave of partygoers, clad in glittering gowns and bespoke tuxedos, took note of his presence with curious eyes. They recognized he was an oddity, the uninvited side of wealth's veneer. Murmurs rippled through the entrance hall. "Is that some kind of waiter?" someone whispered. "I heard Andrew specifically invited him," came another voice. Samantha placed a gentle hand on Carlos's shoulder. "Stay close. If you need anything, text me." She flashed him a supportive smile before vanishing into the crowd to oversee logistical details. Left to his own devices, Carlos ventured further into the mansion's interior. The floors were marble, the ceilings vaulted and adorned with crystal chandeliers. Soft music from a string quartet drifted through the gilded corridors. Servers circled with trays of champagne and canapes. Everything smelled of rosewater, expensive cologne, and polished wealth. Carlos felt like an imposter in a borrowed dream. Despite the elegance, The atmosphere bristled with tension. Andrew Blackwood was making his rounds, greeting his high-profile guests. When he finally spotted Carlos across the room, he paused. At Andrew's side was David Green, a longtime friend and equally successful investor. David's gaze flicked to the street boy. "That's your guest?" he asked, chuckling under his breath. "Don't you think this is a bit extreme?" Andrew's lips curled into a small grin. "Wait and see," he murmured, stepping forward to greet Carlos. Carlos braced himself. He straightened his tie, still not perfectly knotted, and tried to act composed as Andrew approached. "My friend," Andrew began in a tone drenched in exaggerated warmth, "I'm glad you could make it." Carlos managed a polite nod. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Blackwood, and thank you for the suit." Andrew gave a dismissive wave. "Think nothing of it. You're my special guest tonight. I want you to enjoy every part of this experience. Help yourself to the food, the drinks, whatever you like. Don't hold back." He guided Carlos toward a lavish buffet. The boy's eyes widened at the sight. Succulent roast beef, fresh sushi, platters of exotic fruits, and pastries that looked too exquisite to be real. Carlos's stomach rumbled. He realized he hadn't eaten all day. Embarrassment flushed his cheeks as he filled a plate with small portions, trying not to appear greedy. But Andrew gently nudged him. "Take more," he insisted, attracting the attention of a few onlookers who smirked or exchanged knowing glances. Carlos complied, piling an assortment of delicacies onto his plate. As he ate, he became increasingly aware of the stares. Men in tuxedos and women in beaded gowns threw sideward glances, whispering behind champagne glasses. A handful of guests seemed genuinely curious, but more of them appeared amused or disapproving. Andrew seemed to relish this. He introduced Carlos to some of the elite, in each case emphasizing where he had found him. "This is Carlos. I discovered him on the streets." The statement never failed to elicit gasps, uneasy laughter, or pitying eyes. Even so, a small group of philanthropic attendees, including a renowned heiress named Elizabeth Townsend, approached Carlos with genuine concern. "How are you adjusting, dear?" she asked kindly, offering him a seat at a quiet corner table. Carlos swallowed a mouthful of roasted asparagus. "I'm fine. It's overwhelming, but I'm fine." Elizabeth's gaze flickered toward Andrew, who was engaged in boisterous conversation across the room. She lowered her voice. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know." "Andrew, he's complicated. I can't always tell if his intentions are kind or cruel." Carlos nodded, forcing a tentative smile. He could sense that Elizabeth's compassion was real, a rare respite in a sea of fickle attention. The night rolled on, and Andrew decided to up the ante. He summoned the entire gathering to the grand ballroom, where a stage had been set up with a microphone. Chandeliers sparkled like captured starlight overhead, casting prismatic shadows on the polished dance floor. David Green joined Andrew near the edge of the stage, exchanging a mischievous grin. A hush fell over the crowd as Andrew signaled for attention. His voice boomed through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I wanted to do something special. Something that exemplifies the generosity that our social circle is capable of." He beckoned Carlos forward, causing the youth's heart to pound so loudly he wondered if the microphone might pick it up. With apprehensive steps, Carlos approached the stage. He felt hundreds of eyes glued to him. "This young man," Andrew continued, resting an overly familiar arm around Carlos's shoulders, "comes from a very different world than most of us. He has survived hardships we can scarcely imagine, yet he's here in the midst of luxury as a testament to the opportunities that exist for those with resilience and determination. Let's give him a round of applause." The applause that followed was polite but lukewarm. Some faces showed confusion, some mild embarrassment at the display, while a few, like Elizabeth Townsend, clapped earnestly. Andrew raised a palm to quiet the crowd. I'd like us all to show Carlos that we believe in him, that we support him. Tonight, we'll pass around a donation box for him so he might use it to build a better future. Feel free to contribute whatever you can. A gilded box appeared, carried by Samantha, who flashed Carlos a pained, apologetic look. As the box circulated, guests began slipping in checks or cash, often making a show of it. Some attendees looked slightly uncomfortable with Andrew's ostentatious approach. Others seemed eager to display their charitable spirit in front of the crowd. Even David Green fished out a thick wad of bills and dropped them in with a flourish. Carlos's cheeks burned. On one hand, this was a blessing, an amount of money he had never before dreamed he could possess. On the other, it felt humiliating, turning his plight into a public spectacle. He could sense Andrew's eyes on him, gauging every nuanced reaction. The boy forced himself to stand tall, refusing to cower beneath the condescending display. Eventually, the donation box returned to the stage, noticeably heavy. Andrew weighed it in his hands. "Carlos," he said, turning to the boy, "I hope this helps you. Perhaps you can start a small business or find a place to live." Carlos nodded, speechless. The entire scenario felt surreal. He felt gratitude, anger, and shame all churning inside him. Andrew offered him the microphone. "Why don't you say a few words?" The crowd waited. Carlos took the microphone with trembling hands, scanning the sea of affluent faces. Thank you for your generosity," he began, his voice unsteady. "I never expected something like this. Honestly, I've only known how to survive one day at a time, but maybe now I can think about a different future." For a moment, Carlos believed he sensed genuine warmth in the crowd. A handful of people smiled, genuinely touched by his humility. But he also saw Andrew's smirk. The man was clearly reveling in the spectacle he'd orchestrated. Samantha approached the stage to escort Carlos away. As he descended, Elizabeth Townsend brushed past, patting his shoulder gently. "Stay strong," she whispered, her brows knitted in concern. Once the donation box stunt concluded, the atmosphere shifted. Guests resumed their social chatter, indulging in champagne and caviar, but quiet murmurs about Andrew's behavior spread among the crowd. A few influential figures, including film producer Armand Levesque and real estate tycoon Lily Chang, questioned the ethicality of turning a homeless teenager into a party showpiece. "It feels exploitative," Lily Chang whispered to Armand as they lingered near a decadent ice sculpture. "Sure, the boy gets money, but at what cost? Everyone's gawking at him." Armand nodded, adjusting his bow tie. "Andrew is known for these theatrics. Still, it's not sitting well with me. I wonder if the kid is truly safe in all this." Unbeknownst to them, Andrew overheard their exchange. His ego stung at the notion of being labeled exploitative. Pride made him double down on his plan. If some were murmuring about it being unethical, Andrew's twisted sense of entertainment had found a fresh target, proving he had nothing to apologize for. Meanwhile, Carlos retreated to a corner of the ballroom, overwhelmed by the swirl of events. Clutching a glass of sparkling water, he tried to compose himself. The donation box, stuffed with money for his future, was supposed to be a gift, yet it felt like a brand of shame. He noticed how some guests avoided him, as if proximity might tarnish their status. Samantha, having finished some logistical tasks, found him sitting alone. "Carlos, how are you holding up?" He inhaled shakily. "I feel like everyone's watching me, waiting for me to mess up." Her expression softened. "I'm sorry. This wasn't my idea. Andrew can be impulsive." Carlos studied her face, noticing the wrinkles of concern etched on her forehead. "Why do you work for him?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've asked myself that many times. The truth is, Andrew isn't all bad. He can be generous in surprising ways. But yes, he has a cruel streak. I stay because, well, it's complicated. He helped my family when we were going through a crisis. I've felt indebted ever since. Carlos understood feeling indebted, though on an entirely different scale. What's going to happen after tonight? I mean, do I just go back to the street? Samantha sighed. Let's see how the night unfolds. If you're smart, you might find an ally or two here who can help you even more than Andrew. She excused herself when a staff member beckoned, leaving Carlos with a swirl of new questions. He took one last sip of his water and decided to explore the mansion further. Stepping away from the ballroom, Carlos meandered through ornate corridors lined with priceless art. He paused to study a painting, a Renaissance portrait of a noble woman with sorrowful eyes. It struck him as odd to see such heartbreak immortalized in an environment that celebrated opulence. Soft footsteps behind him made him turn. A woman in a silver gown, her hair swept into an elegant chignon, approached with a glass of champagne. Carlos, right? He nodded, unsure how she even knew his name. I'm Serena Blackwood, she introduced herself, smiling gently. Andrew's cousin. Oh, Carlos felt his nerves coil tighter. Andrew's family had to be just as imposing as he was. Nice to meet you, Mum. She offered a faint laugh. No need for formalities. I actually live in Florida, just visiting for the gala. Andrew didn't mention you in his usual updates, so this was quite a surprise. She paused, searching his face. How are you holding up? You look uneasy. Carlos exhaled. I'm fine. It's just all so new. I don't know how to act. Serena's eyes flickered with sympathy. You act like yourself. That's all you can do, Andrew. She trailed off. Andrew likes to control the narrative, to orchestrate scenes that favor his self-image. Sometimes it's easier to roll with it than fight. But you should know he doesn't hold all the cards. I appreciate that, Carlos said softly. Serena glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then lowered her voice. There's something else. I overheard Andrew talking with David Green earlier. They have a wager going on about you. Carlos stiffened, bracing for the worst. A wager? She nodded, carefully choosing her words. Yes. Andrew bet David that by the end of the night, you'd either break some valuable item in your clumsiness, or cause some scene, or, basically, that you'd embarrass yourself and prove you're not worthy of mixing with the wealthy. Rage flared in Carlos's chest. It felt like molten lava coursing through his veins. So that was the big twist. He was unwittingly part of a cruel bet. I should just leave, he muttered, nails digging into his palms. Serena placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Don't let them win like that. The best revenge is to keep your composure and walk out on your own terms, whatever those are. And if you need any help, I'm here. Her kindness nearly brought tears to his eyes. He swallowed hard. Thank you. I'll think about what to do. Serena gave him a final smile, then glided away, leaving Carlos alone with his conflicting emotions. He felt anger, embarrassment, and a surge of determination not to be Andrew's pawn. Maybe he couldn't stop Andrew's cruelty outright, but he could refuse to be the pitiful victim. Back in the ballroom, conversations grew louder, accompanied by the clink of champagne flutes. A jazz band now played in the corner, setting a lively mood. Andrew, ever the grand showman, had arranged for a surprise performance from a famous pop star, Alicia Denver, whose hits regularly topped the charts. Cameras flashed as Alicia arrived, adding another layer of glitz to the night. Carlos found himself caught in a labyrinth of social interactions. Some guests, upon realizing he was the homeless boy, sought to speak with him, either out of morbid curiosity or misguided pity. Others gave him a wide berth, as though he might be contagious. All the while, Andrew circled the room, confident in his manipulations. The hum of conversation occasionally drifted to his ears, some praising his philanthropy, others calling him a self-serving narcissist. Andrew savored the attention, no matter which form it took. Near the open bar, David Green sipped a cognac and locked eyes with Andrew. With a sly nod, he mouthed, "He'll crack soon." Andrew merely smiled in return, tipping his drink in silent acknowledgement. Unbeknownst to them, Elizabeth Townsend had been observing the interplay. She had wealth beyond measure, but also a soul touched by empathy. The old inheritance from her family line had allowed her to engage in numerous charitable efforts, and something about Carlos's predicament tugged at her heartstrings. Quietly, she approached him while he awkwardly sampled a slice of cheesecake. "Carlos," she spoke softly so as not to startle him. "I wanted to check on you." He turned, exhaling. "I'm just trying to stay out of trouble." She offered a gentle laugh. "Sometimes trouble finds us." "I'm Elizabeth Townsend. I have a foundation that supports education for underprivileged youth. We work with community centers, job training programs, that sort of thing. If you ever want a fresh start, a place to stay, help with schooling, I can arrange that." Carlos blinked, torn between hope and suspicion. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you remind me of someone I knew growing up," Elizabeth replied, her eyes gleaming with memory. "My best friend, Miriam, came from a similarly difficult background. She was bright, determined, but the odds were stacked against her. Sometimes all it takes is one open door." A wave of gratitude washed over him. "Thank you," he managed, voice quavering. "I'd like that." I need that." Elizabeth nodded. "We'll talk soon. For now, enjoy the rest of your night as best you can." For the first time all evening, Carlos felt something other than anxiety or anger. He felt a small flame of possibility. If he could survive this night without succumbing to Andrew's manipulations, he might walk away with a real chance at a better life. Midnight approached, and the mansion's sweeping terraces opened for fresh air. Guests drifted outside to admire the moonlit gardens. A hush fell over the estate, as if the party had reached a crescendo and was now gently descending. Soft laughter and hushed conversations replaced the earlier fanfare. Carlos found himself alone by a marble balustrade overlooking the gardens. He held a glass of sparkling water, swirling the bubbles aimlessly. The night air carried the scent of jasmine and trimmed hedges. "Enjoying the view?" Andrew's voice broke the silence. Carlos turned. Andrew stood casually, hands in his pockets, a sly grin on his face. "Beautiful place," Carlos admitted, "but it feels like a different universe." "That's because it is," Andrew said, stepping beside him. "Wealth is not just about money. It's about atmosphere, presence, the capacity to shape one's surroundings. You've caught a glimpse of it tonight. Does it make you hungry for more?" Carlos weighed his words carefully. "It's more complicated than just wanting money. A home, stability, sure, I want that, but I'm not sure I want to be like this." He gestured to the mansion, implying the false grandeur and hidden cruelty. Andrew's grin tightened. "A moral stance? Interesting, but let's be honest. If someone offered you a chance to live here indefinitely, to dine on caviar and rub shoulders with the rich and famous, you'd jump at it. Anyone would." Carlos met Andrew's gaze. "Maybe once I would have, but tonight I've seen how people can treat each other when they think they're better. I don't want that." Andrew rolled his eyes. "Spare me the sermon. Let's talk about your future. You have that hefty donation box. You're set now, aren't you?" Carlos hesitated. "I'm grateful for it, but it doesn't fix everything." A flicker of annoyance crossed Andrew's face. "No gratitude speech? No tears of joy? I took you in, gave you a suit, fed you, introduced you to people who can help you. Let's not forget it was my idea." Carlos clenched his jaw. "I do appreciate it, but I also know you're using me as entertainment. I heard about your bet with David Green." Andrew's eyes narrowed, the veneer of politeness cracking. "Someone's been talking too much. Let me guess, my cousin Serena? Silence was all the answer he needed. Andrew's voice dropped, laced with arrogance. You might think you've got options, but trust me, these people will forget you the moment you leave. The money will run out. The suits will wear thin, and you'll end up right back on that corner unless you remember who gave you this chance. Carlos felt a tremor run through him. Despite his righteous anger, Andrew's words stung with the ring of possibility. He had no family, no formal education, and minimal resources beyond the donation box. Could he truly break free? Thanks for the warning, Carlos said finally, but I've already found someone willing to help me, Elizabeth Townsend. Andrew's eyebrows lifted. Oh, Elizabeth. She has a heart bigger than her bank account. But don't be fooled. She collects charity cases like some people collect fine china. Eventually she grows bored. Carlos turned away. I'll take my chances. Andrew's smile was cold. Suit yourself. They parted ways, the tension between them palpable. Neither realized that events already set in motion would soon ignite a confrontation that would outshine any drama Andrew might have scripted. Inside, the energy of the party took a chaotic turn. A loud crash echoed from the ballroom, followed by gasps. Guests rushed to see what had happened. A colossal glass centerpiece had toppled from its table, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. The culprit stood trembling beside the wreckage, a young waiter who'd been accidentally jostled by a drunken socialite. Andrew strode into the commotion, eyes sweeping the scene. Upon spotting the terrified waiter, he sneered. "Where's the manager?" he demanded. The trembling waiter tried to explain the push he'd received, but Andrew wasn't listening. The manager arrived, wringing his hands apologetically. Andrew's voice rose, scathing and loud enough for all to hear. "You'll pay for this through your wages, or you're fired." Carlos, watching from a few feet away, felt a surge of empathy. He knew the powerless sensation of being at the mercy of someone with all the authority. Resolute, he stepped forward. It wasn't his fault. A drunk guest knocked into him. Andrew whirled, scanning the crowd for a scapegoat. The drunken socialite had conveniently slipped away. "Stay out of this, Carlos. You're not exactly in a position to dictate how I run my home." Carlos's pulse hammered. He could feel dozens of eyes on him. But the fear of Andrew's wrath was overshadowed by something else, indignation at the injustice. It's not fair to make him pay for an accident. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Silence blanketed the room. Andrew's face darkened. Guests traded uneasy looks. David Green, standing near the stage, sipped his drink with a smug grin, sensing Andrew's temper about to explode. "Oh, so you think you understand fairness now?" Andrew hissed, stepping closer. "You're in my house because I invited you. I provided everything you're wearing. You're eating my food, and now you're telling me how to handle my staff?" Carlos's jaw tightened. He could almost taste his own rage. "I'm not ungrateful. I just think being wealthy doesn't mean you get to bully people." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. No one talked to Andrew Blackwood like that, especially not a homeless teenager. Andrew's nostrils flared. The entire scene felt surreal, as though time had paused. Finally, Andrew let out a mirthless laugh. "You ungrateful brat. I see how it is. The stray dog I tried to feed is now biting at my hand. Well, let's see how you survive without my charity. Let's see how long it takes for Elizabeth Townsend or anyone else to forget all about you." Before Carlos could retort, Andrew turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving a hush that seemed to swallow the music and chatter. David Green followed after him, shaking his head in disbelief. Elizabeth hurried over to Carlos. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice trembling with concern. Carlos's chest felt hollow. "I'm fine, but I think I just burned my only bridge." Elizabeth squeezed his arm. "Not your only one. I'm still here. So are a few others who have seen what Andrew can be." Samantha appeared, her eyes wide with alarm. That was intense. I'm sorry. I wanted to help, but I couldn't find the right moment. Carlos exhaled. It's okay. I couldn't stand there and watch him take it out on that waiter. Samantha nodded. I understand. As the crowd dispersed, the shattered glass was swept away, but the tension remained like static in the air. Carlos looked down at his suit, feeling as if it no longer belonged to him. Tonight, he had waltzed into a different world, and it had spat him back out, along with the illusions he briefly entertained. Time passed in a blur of whispered gossip and uneasy glances. Some guests decided to call it a night, not wanting to linger in Andrew's foul mood. Others clung to the festivities, hoping for more drama. Hiding near the mansion's side entrance, Carlos contemplated how to leave. The donation box was somewhere in the mansion, presumably in a secure room. Andrew had designated. He wondered if Andrew would still let him have it, or if that too was forfeit. Just then, David Green approached with a smug expression. Looking for something, kid? Carlos's shoulders tensed. I'm just trying to figure out how to get home. David chuckled darkly. Home? Weren't you living on the street? He inched closer. You know, Andrew wins this bet if you cause a big enough scene. Right now, you're teetering on the edge. Carlos glared. I'm not a toy. I don't care about your bet. Oh, but you should, David chided, hooking his thumbs in his suspenders. Because you're about to leave here with nothing. If Andrew has his way, Carlos's gut twisted. And what do you want from me? David shrugged. I was just about to suggest that if you apologize to Andrew in front of everyone, maybe he'll relent. Show some gratitude publicly. Let him win. Then you might keep the donation money at least. Carlos felt a wave of revulsion. Apologize for standing up to injustice? It was unthinkable, yet the threat of losing the only tangible security he'd ever been offered gnawed at him. He swallowed, fists clenching. I'd rather sleep on the street than grovel to him. David smirked. Suit yourself. Enjoy your moral high ground with an empty stomach. He strode away, leaving Carlos trembling with frustration. But as the door swung open behind him, in walked Lily Chang, the real estate mogul who had earlier expressed concern about Andrew's exploitation. She offered a sympathetic smile. I overheard. David can be vicious, especially when Andrew's in a bad mood. Carlos tried to steady his breathing. I'm fine. Lily shook her head gently. You shouldn't have to be. Look, I've seen Andrew humiliate people before, but this is too far. I'm not going to stand by. She reached into her clutch and produced a business card. You come find me at my offices. I have properties all over the city, and I'm sure we can find a safe place for you until you land on your feet. Carlos hesitated. Hope and doubt warred within him. Why would you do that? She offered a reassuring smile. Andrew once said something cruel about my father years ago, mocking his accent at a public function. My father was a proud immigrant who worked his way up. Andrew's words humiliated him. I never forgot that feeling. No one deserves to be made a spectacle. Let me help you. He took the card, feeling tears threaten to well in his eyes. Thank you. With Lily's offer, plus Elizabeth's earlier pledge, Carlos realized that Andrew's hold on him might not be absolute. Perhaps people in this world did have hearts and souls beyond the glimmer of their fortunes. Around 2 a.m., the gala's momentum waned. Only the most committed revelers remained, still sipping premium liquors or snacking on leftovers from the buffet. Carlos drifted through the mansion, searching for Samantha or Elizabeth, someone he could trust to help him gather the donation box before slipping out. He found Samantha in Andrew's study, speaking in hushed tones with Andrew himself. Their voices were raised, but he couldn't make out the words from the hallway. Mustering courage, Carlos stepped closer, ears pricked. You can't just take the donation away. Samantha's voice trembled with anger. People gave that money for Carlos, not for you. Andrew let out a dismissive scoff. He disrespected me in my home. Why should I reward that? Samantha's tone sharpened. What will everyone think when they learn you used a donation box as a power play? Andrew sneered. No one will learn anything. Besides, it's mine to do with as I please. The kid has an attitude problem, and I'm not about to encourage his insolence. Carlos felt his blood run cold. So Andrew did plan to keep the donation. All that talk of changing his life was apparently just a performance. Before he could decide how to intervene, Samantha stormed out, nearly colliding with him in the corridor. "Carlos!" she exclaimed, eyes widening. She glanced back to ensure Andrew wasn't following. "You heard," she concluded from his expression. Carlos nodded, heart heavy. "I appreciate you trying." She pursed her lips, searching his eyes. "There might be a way. He keeps the donation box in the lockbox behind his desk. I have the code, but if you take it now, he'll accuse you of theft." Carlos hesitated. The money had been donated to him, but everything in Andrew's domain would be twisted to fit Andrew's narrative. "What can I do?" Samantha closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "Let me talk to him again. Maybe I can talk some sense into him, or at least reason with him when he's less drunk. If he refuses, I'll try to get that box to you discreetly, or at least ensure it gets to Elizabeth Townsend to hold for you." Carlos's chest felt tight with gratitude and worry. "Why are you risking so much for me?" Her gaze faltered. "Because I see a lot of my younger brother in you. He died, overdose, lived on the streets for a while. If someone had helped him, things might have turned out differently. I won't stand by and watch Andrew destroy you for sport." Emotion swelled in Carlos's throat. He managed to nod, unable to form words. Samantha placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and walked away, determined. Carlos decided it was time to leave. Money or not, he couldn't stay in Andrew's orbit. With Elizabeth Townsend and Lily Chang offering their support, he felt confident he could survive the fallout of defying Andrew. The moral victory of not bending to a manipulator was more valuable than any stacked donation box. Yet fate had one more surprise in store. By the time Carlos reached the front doors, the night sky was already beginning to lighten with the faint promise of dawn. Valets waited by a row of luxury cars, some dozing off from the long shift. As Carlos stepped outside, a flurry of movement at the gate caught his eye. Reporters. A cluster of them, cameras flashing. Word had apparently leaked about Andrew's philanthropic spectacle. Maybe someone had tipped them off, or they were scavenging for a juicy story about the unusual gala invitation. Carlos froze. The last thing he wanted was to be swarmed by paparazzi. He contemplated slipping back inside, but Andrew's wrath loomed there. On the other hand, maybe the media could be a tool shed light on Andrew's hypocrisy. But he was no media manipulator. The cameras intimidated him more than Andrew's arrogance ever could. As he lingered in uncertainty, the mansion doors behind him swung open. Out stepped Andrew, flanked by David Green. Their expressions were grim, locked onto the same spectacle of reporters at the gate. Andrew recognized an opportunity to spin the narrative or clamp down on it, whichever served him best. Instinctively, Carlos moved to step out of Andrew's path, not wanting a confrontation with a crowd of journalists present. But Andrew seized the moment, gently gripping Carlos's shoulder in an alarming show of camaraderie. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Andrew called, striding toward the gates, "allow me to introduce my special guest of the evening." Cameras whirred, microphones jutted forward. Andrew put on a polished grin, his voice smooth as velvet. "It is with great pleasure that I present Carlos Ramirez, a young man with limitless potential. Tonight, my friends and I have donated a substantial sum to help him find his path. It's important for the wealthy to give back." He was cut off by a stern voice from the crowd. "Is it true you're withholding the donation from him, Mr. Blackwood?" Andrew blinked, the question blindsiding him. "Absolutely not," he lied. the forced smile never wavering. Carlos has full access to those funds. We only want the best for him. More cameras flashed. Another journalist shouted, "We've heard rumors of a bet involving this young man's behavior." Care to comment? Andrew's jaw tightened momentarily, but he regained composure. Such rumors are nonsense. I invited Carlos out of genuine compassion. I'm saddened that anyone would twist this act of generosity into something ugly. Next to him, Carlos trembled with conflicting emotions. Here was Andrew, spinning an outright fabrication, painting himself as a philanthropic hero. But then he spotted Samantha off to the side, giving him a subtle nod. She held the donation box under one arm, partially concealed by her coat. She mouthed the words, "Take it." 1,000 thoughts raced through Carlos's mind. This was a chance, maybe the only chance, to assert the truth publicly. He stepped forward, ignoring Andrew's stiffening grip on his shoulder. "Mr. Blackwood is lying," he said, voice shaking but resolute. An immediate hush fell over the reporters, cameras still snapping. Andrew's face twisted in fury. Carlos continued, "Yes, there was a bet he wanted to see if I'd embarrass myself tonight. He used me for entertainment. He threatened to withhold the money his guests donated to me. I only learned about this when I overheard him. A ripple of shock surged through the press. Microphones aimed at Andrew for a rebuttal, but he seemed momentarily stunned. David Green tried to intervene, stepping in with a scowl. "That's absurd," David began. "He's a street urchin, fabricating stories." Then Samantha stepped forward, the donation box in her arms, eyes blazing. "He's telling the truth. I work for Mr. Blackwood. I was there. I heard everything." These funds were donated to Carlos by the attendees, not by Andrew, and I can assure you, Andrew tried to keep them for himself. She thrust the box into Carlos's hands. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the throng of reporters. Andrew, recovering his composure, put on a brittle smirk. "I don't know what's prompted this betrayal from my assistant, but let me assure you—" He never finished. Serena Blackwood, who had witnessed the entire exchange from the terrace, approached. "Cousin, enough. I also overheard you discuss the bet with David. You can't twist the narrative anymore." By now, the chaos in front of the mansion was at a fever pitch, reporters clamoring for quotes, phones recording the explosive confrontation. Andrew stood in the center, undone by his own arrogance, pinned beneath the weight of multiple testimonies. Even if he tried to cover this up, the footage was already captured on smartphones and cameras. It would spread like wildfire. He sputtered for a moment, then turned on his heel, storming back into the mansion. David Green, flustered, followed. The press swarmed Carlos, hurling questions in rapid fire. "How did you meet Mr. Blackwood? What will you do with the donation money now? Are you planning legal action?" Carlos, overwhelmed, clutched the heavy box to his chest. Samantha and Serena both guided him through the crowd, politely but firmly declining further interviews. Eventually, they managed to get him into a waiting SUV owned by Lily Chang, who gestured for the driver to pull away from the mansion. As they sped through the quiet, early morning streets of Beverly Hills, Carlos felt tears stinging his eyes, tears of relief, exhaustion, and a trace of triumph. He had confronted Andrew Blackwood publicly, and somehow he had won. In the days that followed, the media ran wild with the story. Headlines like "Millionaire's charity stunt backfires" splashed across tabloids. Talk show hosts debated Andrew's moral bankruptcy versus the compassion shown by those who stood up for Carlos. Social media erupted in commentary, many condemning Andrew while celebrating Carlos's bravery. For Andrew, the fallout was severe. Several of his business associates distanced themselves from him, worried about the negative press. Charitable organizations that once enjoyed the spotlight at his galas declined future partnerships. Even David Green found his reputation tarnished as the recordings of his taunts surfaced online. Meanwhile, Carlos found sanctuary in a modest apartment near Lily Chang's real estate offices. She arranged for a short-term lease, while Elizabeth Townsend's foundation helped him enroll in a JED program. The donation money, tens of thousands of dollars in total, was placed in a secure account overseen by a legal guardian until Carlos reached 18. For now, he received a monthly stipend that allowed him to live decently while focusing on his education. Samantha tendered her resignation from Andrew's employment. She cited irreconcilable ethical differences. Andrew's legal team tried to threaten her, but public opinion was overwhelmingly on her side. She later found a new role as a project manager for a non-profit that worked with homeless youth, a decision spurred by the memory of her late brother. Serena returned to Florida, but not before publicly condemning Andrew's actions and praising Carlos's integrity. "We are each responsible for the way we use our resources," she said in a televised interview. "No amount of money can justify humiliating another human being." Gradually, Carlos settled into his new life. It wasn't easy adjusting to the routine of classes and living indoors after years on the street. He grappled with nightmares and the perpetual fear that it could all vanish. But each day, he grew a bit more confident. The support from Elizabeth, Lily, and Samantha reminded him that not everyone in a position of power sought to exploit the vulnerable. One afternoon, Carlos visited the corner where he used to sell trinkets. The sidewalk felt both familiar and distant. An older homeless man he recognized asked how he was doing. Carlos handed him a few bills and some words of encouragement. In that moment, he realized that while he had escaped this particular fate, thousands still remained. It fueled his resolve to make the most of the opportunity given to him to one day give back, not out of pity or for show, but out of genuine empathy. He remembered Andrew's sneer, the words about how no one would remember him after that night. Yet here he was, forging a path that felt more true, more honest than any facade Andrew's mansion could offer. In time, Andrew Blackwood's scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by the next trending outrage. But for Carlos, the lessons of that night remained etched in his heart. Wealth could corrupt, but it could also empower. Compassion could be real, or it could be a masquerade. He had witnessed both extremes and emerged with a rare clarity many people twice his age never found. He vowed never to let that clarity slip away. And so ends the tale of how one fateful night forever reshaped the destinies of a shrewd millionaire and a resourceful street boy. Andrew Blackwood learned that wealth alone can't shield a tarnished reputation, while Carlos discovered that the kindness of a few good people can illuminate a path out of darkness. If this story moved you, if it stirred your sense of justice, hope, or compassion, remember that every like, share, and subscription helps us continue telling powerful stories that resonate. Join us in spreading the message that empathy triumphs over cruelty and second chances can come when least expected. By liking this video, sharing it with friends, and subscribing to our channel, you empower us to create more tales that spark change and encourage thoughtful dialogue. Thank you for watching, and may we all choose humanity over indifference in our own lives.